Hi, and welcome back to episode 2 of Shenanigans from a Cumbrian Village by Martin Lloyd. Read by Taff Williams. Chapter 6. Brandy Galore. Having 3 young children, my wife and I always saw the New Year in at home, with the children fast asleep in bed. One New Year, we had just consumed a few beers and were about to retire to bed at about 12:15 when the telephone rang. It was Rob wishing us a happy new year and insisting I come to the pub to have a wee dram for the New Year hogmanay. The wife said, "Go on, you might as well. I'm off to bed. See you later." The pub was only 150 yards from our cottage, so I was there within 5 minutes. The pub was heaving, with most people very drunk. It was a sight for sore eyes. There was nothing worse when everyone around you is drunk and you are sober. The idiocy of drunkenness becomes so apparent. Rob was propping up the bar and I sat next to him and he just shook my hand, wished me a happy new year and bought me a whiskey. He was a bit unsteady and asked me could I take him home. I managed to get Bob home okay and kissed his wife wishing her a happy new year, and we all sat by the fire in the lounge. In Scotland it is traditional to have a steak pie to see in the new year, and Rob's wife Mary had been baking one. The aromas coming from the kitchen were delightful. Mary insisted I have some supper and we all eat steak pie. Neeps and tatties in the dining room. It was absolutely delicious. The finest cuts of beef cooked to perfection, washed down with a few glasses of expensive red wine. Mary then went to bed and Bob and I retired to the lounge. Rob said we should have one for the road and asked me what I'd like to drink. I rarely drink spirits, but Rob asked if I could have a small brandy. Rob was getting the worse for wear by now and told me to go to the drinks cabinet and help myself. "Have whatever you want," he said. "It's hogmanay." Rob put on some music and I went to the drinks cabinet. I opened the drinks cabinet and discovered it was full of brandy, whiskey, gin, beer and lager. There were 3 bottles of brandy in the cabinet, with one fancy looking one stacked at the back and opened. I removed the bottle and poured a stiff measure into a fancy brandy glass. By this time Rob had fallen asleep and I sat by the fire drinking my brandy and listening to the music. Les Miserables. The brandy was absolutely delicious, the smoothest I had ever tasted. I sat there contemplating the meaning of life until the entire bottle was finished. It was 6:45 a.m. in the morning, and Bob was fast asleep in his chair. I was quite drunk and struggled to get out of the chair. I managed to stagger home, which was fortunately only about 75 yards, and managed to sneak quietly into bed. I awoke at 12:45 p.m. with the most horrendous hangover. I gingerly went downstairs and wished the children a happy new year and made a strong cup of coffee. The wife said, "What happened to you last night?" I told her the full story and said it must have been something I ate. Later on the day at about 5 o'clock I decided to go for a quick hair of the dog in the pub. There were about 12 people in the pub with Rob propped up the bar looking a little bit dishevelled. "You Welsh bastard," he yelled. "Why the fuck did you drink that brandy?" I replied, "You said I could have anything I want, and then you fell asleep." He went on to explain that brandy was a special gift he'd received 7 years ago from a wealthy client, and he was keeping it for a special occasion. The value of that particular bottle of brandy was in excess of £750. I genuinely felt terrible and apologised profusely. Rob said, "Ugh, don't worry about it. Happy New Year, you Welsh bastard." Chapter 7. The Baby Alarm. One Sunday afternoon, around 6 of the locals were chatting at the bar when suddenly the baby alarm in the bar activated. We did not hear the gentle crying of a baby stirring, but something completely different. There were oohs and ahs and grunts and snorts and gasps and moans. The sound was of 2 people who were making very passionate love. The landlord turned the volume up and we all fell off our chairs laughing. No one could work out where the sounds were coming from. After about 5 minutes, 2 distinct voices were recognised. It was Bill and Janet, the couple living directly next to the pub. It transpired their baby alarm was exactly the same as the one in the pub, and the pub baby alarm was picking up their signal. I did the decent thing and immediately went to Bill and Janet's house and told them exactly what had happened. The baby alarm was duly dispatched to the bin. Bill saw the funny side but received a lot of stick whenever he came to the pub, and the locals gave him a new nickname, Studley Goodfuck. Chapter 8. Dodgy Fireworks. Bonfire night was always a big occasion in the village. To purchase fireworks we had a large collection jar which was placed on the bar and the locals would donate their loose pennies and coins. We'd erect a huge bonfire on the pub car park and hot dogs and toffee apples were given to the children. One year we raised £161 to pay for the food and fireworks. One of the locals, Tim, said he had a contact where we could purchase cheap fireworks that came directly from China. We all agreed and went ahead with the order. When the fireworks arrived, there was a large plain box. We were all a bit sceptical. The box contained a cardboard launching tube and about 15 balls, and all about 6 inches in diameter, which appeared to be wrapped in a brown paper with a fuse at one end. The instructions stated to light the fuse and drop into the launching tube. On bonfire night, we had about 50 spectators gathered around the bonfire. Tim, who bought the fireworks, agreed to be the lighter. We secured the launching tube and advised everyone to stay well back. Tim took the first firework ball, lit the fuse and dropped it into the launching tube. After about 10 seconds, the tube and firework exploded, sending bright flaming fragments in every direction. People were screaming and terrified, and fireworks were shooting everywhere. It lasted about 10 seconds. Apart from some damage to 2 nearby cars, miraculously no one was hurt or burned. Needless to say, there were no more fireworks that night, and the remainder of the brown balls from China were dispatched to the bin. Chapter 9. New Landlord and Snooty Landlady. Unfortunately, Seamus, the landlord, decided to move on to pastures greener, and new tenants Rick and Eleanor took over the pub. Rick was very polite, very well spoken, albeit a bit shy and henpecked. Eleanor was rather plump, very assertive and a trifle snobbish. She was definitely the dominant partner in the relationship. It was like 2 square pegs in 2 round holes. They started producing meals with a limited menu of homemade food. One evening, Connor and I were at the bar having a quiet pint, when a couple who were strangers to the village sat down and ordered a meal. When they had finished their meal, Eleanor asked, was everything okay? The couple replied that everything was, and asked, how are you settling in the pub? Eleanor replied, we are settling in very well, but are desperately trying to attract a better class of clientele. Connor and I looked at each other and nearly choked on our beer. A few weeks later, Connor had arranged a barbecue in his garden and invited Rick and Eleanor to attend on a Sunday afternoon. Eleanor replied that she would allow Rick to come while she ran the pub. On the day of the barbecue, it was a beautiful summer's day, and we all sat round the barbecue in Connor's back garden. Connor had brewed his own banana wine and offered a glass to Rick. Rick was a very moderate drinker, but he liked the sweetness of the banana wine. Rick continued drinking the wine throughout the afternoon, while the rest of us stuck to beer. By 4 o'clock, Rick was a little worse for wear and could barely stand. Connor said we'd better get him home and proceeded to his shed to get a wheelbarrow. We loaded Rick into the wheelbarrow and proceeded to take him back to the pub. We wheeled him into the bar and said, Eleanor, we've brought your husband home. He's had a bit too much to drink. Suddenly, in front of the customers, Rick started gargling some obscure song, still sat in the wheelbarrow. There was a look of sheer horror on Eleanor's face, and she turned to a bright shade of red as most of the customers started laughing. Eleanor then slapped Rick across the head, pulled him out of the wheelbarrow and dragged him up the stairs to put him to bed. To escape Eleanor's wrath, we quickly returned to the barbecue and had a good laugh. Connor said, better class of clientele, my ass. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and please come back for more.